Hello everyone, welcome to my developer vlog. Developer log? I don't know what this is. Welcome to my game development vlog. I don't know why you're here, but if you are watching this is basically just for me to review some of the things I learned and kind of show off some cool stuff maybe for my first game that I'm making ever. So maybe a good working title for this would be Ramblings of a First-Time Game Developer, because I've never made a game before. I do work as a software developer right now for a couple years now. Tried to learn game development for, I don't know, last couple years on and off. I would pick up a tutorial, stop a tutorial, pick one up again. And so just recently I just finished one, and I got to the point where I felt like I was improving on the code that the tutorials were doing. And so I thought I'd give it a shot to finally start my game. And so this is actually after my first weekend working on the game that I wanted to make. And I've had this game in my head for quite a while now, at least the story-wise. I wanted to make a cozy game kind of centered on getting a dog. So if you can see at the top, my working title of the game is called Don't Get a Dog, because it's going to be about all of the misadventures that you can get into with your dog. I guess let's just jump right into what my weekend was about. I'm just starting out, and I wanted to start working on kind of the basic interactions that you might have in my game. So it's kind of like a RPG with a cozy vibe, maybe like something like Stardew Valley, hopefully, with more of a story about it. One of the things that you should have to do is to feed and take care of your dog, right? I spent time kind of working on the player movements, getting into like not walking through walls, and then as well as picking up things. Consider this like a food bowl. This little blue thing is like my sink, so I can fill up with water. I can empty the water. And I can also pick up the sink, which doesn't really make much sense now, but that was something that I had to think about before. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with some basic interactions and interaction system. So I kind of want to share like how this progress was done. So this is actually where I'm at with the, which I think is quite good, clean structure, but I want to kind of show how I got there. So let's go to when I just finished kind of the player movement and some interactions. So this is kind of the big break first thing that I did, was just moving the player around. So you can see I just have home, player, and I think I have the wall interactions, and I can't really do anything yet, but I can detect stuff that I want to interact with. How did this work? I think basically I have this area 2D that can detect things, and so when it detects things that it can interact with, then it says, you know, it's in range or whatever. And then this is just a tile map with some physics layers on top for the wall. So right now this is all just basic Godot things, and you know, you can in a layer you can paint over with physics. So here I can see that on this tile map in particular, I painted over this thing, these walls here. You can, that's why they're in blue. So this is the physics layer. I put it on, right now it's just on, it can only be hit by the player. Yeah, so that's kind of it with the movement. I can kind of go into the code a little bit, but I think that's a bit too much into the details. But it's just basically moving around and flipping the direction of the sprites. Actually, I kind of want to focus more on the interaction system, so let me jump back around about how I did that, because I think that's kind of the more interesting part of this, or at least what I was proud of this weekend. You can see I have like user stories and stuff, because I'm a software developer, that's how I'm used to working. So I actually created some ways to break this down for me, which I think made that much easier, but I think I'll get into that later at some point, or if that's interesting to you, I can talk a bit about how I set that up. But again, this is really just for me, so I don't expect anyone to be listening to this at all. So for this thing, I started setting up like base classes and things that can interact. So I have a base class called like interactable. All it is an area 2D with the sprite and then the collision shape. And so this is then anything that the player can interact with. So this would be then detected when the player moves around. that I can interact with these things, right? And then there's like, there's different kinds of things you can interact with. Like there could be things you can pick up, like this water bowl, or things that I can just kind of approach, like this thing, the sink. So if I take this water bowl and go to the sink, it fills up, and then I could empty it. So then you started creating this kind of whole class of different things. So I have a base class of interactables, I have a thing of holdable, and then I have things that could be filled. And I thought this was quite clever, developing all these scenes and inheriting. So like fillable script inherits from holdable script, which inherits from interactable script. And they just kind of add on different things from there. But the problem with this was when I got to kind of the very next user story that I was supposed to work on. I think it was this one. I started with the water bowl and then the thing. And then I was in the middle of them thinking about this one is add food to a bowl. And so what I'm supposed to do is be able to hold a bag of something and then bring it to the bowl to pour food from the bowl or from the bag into the bowl, right? So what that means is that I should be able to pick something up and then pour something in here. But the problem is I have like, this thing is, holdable and also fillable. But I wasn't thinking that the sink is something you could pick up, or like, this kind of thing that gives resources, gives water, gives food, could be able to be picked up. If this is also, something that can fill something, but also can be held, then what about this sink? How do I kind of structure the logic of having something that can be picked up and poured out, or like to give something, and something that is stationary that can be that you can go to receive something? It's really broke a lot of my things. So I could see this getting kind of crazily out of hand if I didn't do something about the structure of this. I'm not a game dev. I have software development experience, and I can think a little bit about logic in the code, and I feel quite comfortable with that. But I don't know what the best way to structure things. So this is where I think using resources like ChatGPT or other kind of LLMs can be really handy. Like I don't want to use these things to like create art or help with, let's say, the creativity of this thing, but it can be a good tool for being like your senior game developer, or someone who maybe your game architect or your level designer, that way you can kind of give feedback to. You can describe your game, talk about it, and go back and forth, right, about certain things until you arrive at a conclusion that makes sense to you. And of course, you should add your own twists to things and innovations on top of that. And so that's kind of what I've been doing. And so when I came to this problem, I started, asking certain questions of like, how can I structure this better? We after, kind of going back and forth, arrived at this conclusion of, instead of having, actual scenes that represent different base classes of things, so this fillable, holdable, and these things are inherited, instead of doing something like that, we could do some kind of composition instead. Instead of inheriting from different things, you would have, one script for filling something and one script for holding something, and they just kind of contain the logic themselves, and then you could add them on top of each other. So fillable wouldn't have to be holdable. Fillable could be separate. It's just a separate capability. Problem is that in Godot and GDScript, you can't really do like implements. There's no interfaces and things like that. What I was basically doing was then creating another kind of resource for this. And that's kind of what I wanted to show next, is how I solved this problem through a lot of trial and error. This one actually, like, getting to this point of just filling this bowl and emptying this bowl was for me actually quite quick. I think in just a few hours, maybe 6 or so. And then rewriting everything took me probably 12 hours. I think I was doing this all yesterday, maybe even longer, from the morning until kind of quite late into the evening, with very little breaks, because rewriting it got super complicated for me, and it was kind of difficult to wrap my head around. But I think that's kind of the cool part of doing this whole thing, that solving these problems and trying to get all this stuff to work. This one, I kept the interactable as my base class, but the idea here is that I'm only going to have one interactable base class, and then what I have on top of that are interactions that an interactable is capable of. So if I go to the sink thing, you can see that it's a fill source of water, it's an empty container for water, and it's something that I can pick up now. And so if I go here to my sink, I pick it up and I go to this bowl, I can fill that, I can fill that, I can also interact here and empty that and empty that. And just to be curious, I'm actually just using one mouse click for all these interactions, and then my hopefully by, filtering out what the player is doing, what they're holding, that these interactions won't overlap with each other. But I'm still a little concerned about that one. But this is the cool part. So then if I, let's stop this and then, remove the empty part from this and then run it again, then I can come here and fill the bowl, but I can't empty it anymore, right? And just like that, I can fill, but I can't empty. And so I just have then scenes that represent the other objects, but then I just need to add different capabilities to them to get the abilities that I want. And I think that was really, really cool. And I think this is something that maybe might be nice to dive into a little bit more in this kind of rambling session that I'm doing right now. And so if I go into the code, I have an interactable, and I have basically something called an interactions library of IDs. And so these are the different files that I have that contain each interaction. So if I go into my resources folder, my interactions folder, you can see that I have this base interactions resource. This is basically holds all the logic for all the interactions, okay? And so this is what I created as a resource. And then from there, I just create separate resources for each single interaction. So I have one for emptying something. This is maybe easier to see here. So I have this empty container. So you can see that there's a type to this thing. So this is type of empty container. What can it empty? It can empty water. And this is, I haven't used this one yet, but this was in preparation. So then I have this like fillable thing. This thing can be filled with dog food. So this could be like the dog food bowl. This can be filled with water. And then this is a source of something. So this thing can fill something with water, and then this thing can be held. So these are the different things that interactions that I created. And they're all just based on this one file that holds all the interactions state, right? So basically there's just a type and then what it can be filled with. So anytime that I add a new interaction, I'll add something here. And then if it needs some additional state, then I'll put that stuff here. And the main thing is that when you set it up, the parent becomes the interactable item, which is done here. And the player just calls on their function when they find something they can interact with. They'll first try to find something they can interact with. So then I have this user by thing. So the player will then be the actor here, and it'll return, a list of nearby things that the user can interact with based on this logic. And then hopefully then it'll just grab the first interaction that it can do with the object that is closest to it. And this was quite annoying because it was getting confusing of what's doing what the different actions were and who can do what action. So at first it was like everything was just the player is interacting with this, so then I was just checking player stuff. But then for things like so that makes more sense for something like holdable, right? So who can hold something? Only player can hold something, or maybe other characters. So I might change this to characters, but in general, holding makes a lot of sense, right? Only the player can hold something. But for things like fillable, the player is not actually filling the bowl. It's whatever we take the bowl to. So the sink is filling the water bowl, for example, and the trash can is emptying the water bowl. And that became a bit more complicated. At first, when I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like if I go to the sink, here, like if I want to try to fill something, if I go to the sink and I'm the player, then all I care about is if the player is holding something, and can that thing that the player is holding be filled with what the sink is offering, so water in this case. And that's how I started, and then it got quite complicated with a bunch of other stuff. I won't dive too much into that, but it got kind of quite confusing, and I kept having a lot of bugs. And the naming of my functions were not very good because it was all just interact by, use by. And so instead of saying usable by, like, empty container usable by actor, it's more about checking the capability. Like, so can empty, can this thing, the container, can the container empty some other thing? And so now we're checking to see, like, okay, if that other thing is interactable, then that thing needs to be filled with what this container accepts, the fill type of this container. And so if it's true, then that's true. If it's the player, then it's checking what the player is holding, and then passing this back in and saying, okay, is the thing that the player is holding interactable, and is it filled with this thing? And I think by renaming things, it became much more clear who is doing the action versus like this very ambiguous language. I think that is maybe most of what I wanted to share today. I think there were some cool or interesting gotchas at part of the flow too. Was that like I would make this like resource and then I would drag this resource on top of a water bowl and then realize something was wrong with the resource. And because these were dragged on, they would actually duplicate it. And so any changes that I made in the resource were not actually changed in the water bowl. And so what I ended up doing actually was creating a script that would make this library file. Where did I put you? I think you're in tools maybe? Yeah. No, utils, library here. So basically now, instead of adding the resources directly, what I do is have a list of IDs, and depending on which ID you choose, it'll automatically grab the original file. So any changes then that I make from the original files will be maintained in the resources that use them. So if you look at then interactable, you select which interaction you want, and then the interactions resource is then found based on this utility helper thing that I have. But I think now I'm actually quite an interesting space where I'm ready for doing the food bowl. And actually, maybe I can do that here as well as part of this video, or at least recording this section, just show how easy it is to do that now. So let's put in a food bowl. So first I want to create a new interactable based on this scene. I'm gonna call this thing kibble. Actually, it's not a food bowl, it's a kibble bag. I need a kibble bag. Let's just pick a random sprite for now. So I don't know. Oops. Oh wait. Okay. I don't know. This is. I didn't really think this one through. Okay, let's call that my bag. Okay, kibble bag, clean shape sprite. All right. And then this kibble bag, you need to do what? You need to be picked up. So you need to be holdable. You need to be a source, which I don't have. So I don't have a fill source for food yet. So I need to create a new one. So interaction. So in my interactions, I'm going to create new resource, interaction resource. And this is going to be a fill source for kibble or dog food. Let's call it dog food. I haven't decided. Have I decided? Let's call it kibble. Actually, maybe 1 second. Let me check my thing. I can't remember if I decided if I wanted to do dog food. Yeah, I did dog food generically. So then maybe at some point I'll split this up. But for now, everything can just be dog food. I think that's fine. Maybe a better kinds of dog food, but I don't know if I really care if it's like kibble or chicken or whatever. So let's do that. Let's keep that the same. So create new resource, interaction resource, and then you are a fill source for dog food. Okay. And now that I have this resource here, I can run my script, my util function, my tools, and then do run. If I open up my interactions library file, you should see that there's now a fillable source of dog food, and then this is the reference to that resource. Maybe I need to reload a bit, so let me just save this. Interactions, new folder, let's call it kibble. Kibble scene, save. Let's reload this window because I think that script, not everything's refreshed yet. Okay, holdable, and yep, fill source dog food. Is that all you can do? Can you empty dog food? I'm gonna say no. You don't put food back in the bowl. Okay, so that's that. And now I need a food bowl, and I'm just gonna be lazy here. And I'm gonna copy my water bowl scene and call you food bowl, and then also call you food bowl. And let's open this up, And then all I need to do is take off of you're not fillable by water, you're fillable by dog food. And hopefully, if I did everything correctly, I have some water bowls here. Let me just delete one. I'm gonna add my kibble to the scene, drag you over here, and then I'm gonna also add then, not that, my food bowl, and then also put you here. Let's make the food bowl a little bit bigger just so you can see that there's some difference here, because otherwise I'm gonna get confused. Alright. Okay, so this is my food bowl, this is my kibble, this is my water bowl. So water bowl still fills. Cool. Kibble, I take my kibble. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, I accidentally put the water bowl as a parent of this thing, I guess? I don't know what happened here. What's going on? Why? What happened? I think, yeah, I think the parenting got weird. I did a parent of a parent. Okay. And I didn't want a water bowl, I wanted a food bowl. Let me do that. Food bowl. Why are you called water bowl? Did I not save this? Oh, I didn't change the name here. Okay. Food bowl. Let's not get super confused. Okay, delete this. And then go to home. Food bowl. Okay, and then like I said, let's make this bigger, just so I know the difference. 5. And bring you, oops, you're outside. Bring you in here. Okay, so my kibble, take my kibble, and I can hopefully, nope, it doesn't work. Why don't you work? Oh, I don't think I made the actual functions for this yet. Did I? I think I might have messed up somewhere in these things. So fillable dog food accepts fill type dog food, that makes sense. Fill source dog food, of course I didn't do this. So this resource I called it fill source dog food, but I forgot to set it up. So you are a fill source and you fill with dog food. Let's hope that's all I need to do. Cross fingers. Yeah, I filled that with dog food and I can't empty it. If I then take my water bowl, I can fill this with water, but this one should not be fillable. Yep, and I can't fill my dog food bowl with water. I can only fill it here. And then if I take my dog food bowl and bring it to the kibble, I can also put stuff inside. Easy, cool. And that was just by adding, you know, one more resource, making sure to configure it correctly. But then I don't have all of these children, the scenes that I'm creating are just for, you know, visuals. And I could probably even do this also via code, maybe adding the sprite, but I actually like having maybe different scenes for every single object. I think it makes it easy for me to see, understand, and recognize. Those are my thoughts for today. That's kind of as far as I got. Hope you enjoyed if you were actually listening to this. To my first vlog about being a game developer. And more to come soon, I guess. Cool. Thanks for watching. Bye. From the future, I realized I just wanted to do one more thing since I've finished something. So let's see. Add food to bowl in progress. Player can interact with bowl while holding kibble. Yep. Bowl only accepts food if it has water. This I'm not gonna do. Not doing this. Bowl tracks has food state. Has a fill thing, so that's fine. Yes. Bowl visually updates when food is added. Yeah, I didn't really do much. And bowl emits food added signal. This I didn't do. And maybe I'll do this later, but for now I think these things are not so necessary. So maybe later. So I think that means that my user story is done. User story 6 done. Next up is the dog. And dog eats from bowl. Cool. If you're wondering how I did this, I described what I wanted to do with ChatGPT, and then asked it to create user stories for me. And then you can see like I disagree on some things. Like it's not like I just follow everything that the AI says. I only do things that make sense to what I want to do in the game. So I think that's really important here. But it's such a good like chunking thing. I was quite overwhelmed with everything that could come into a game obviously, and I didn't know where to start. And so it came up with this idea of like, start with a tutorial. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so start with like, player movement and interactions. And I think this interaction came quite early. And especially if I just did it the way they did, I would not have developed this interaction system that I think is now super clean, easy to expand upon. Yeah. So I think that it also comes with the kind of experience of learning other things and understanding how things should work together. But it's helpful to then ask questions to a lot of stuff. Okay, anyway, that's it. Bye again.